Giants, Nephilim, Anunnaki, whatever you want to call them, it kind of looks like they might have existed. And if they did, they had to wear something. So today let's talk about giant clothing accessories. One of the things I've had my eye on for a very long time is this Hongshan culture. And why that is because in my own personal interests, I would have considered myself a picker. I liked ancient relics just for fun, for collection. Not that I was trying to thieve anything out of anyone's country, but I would seek these things. And so in perusing the internet, one of the things that I came across were the alien artifacts, or the stuff associated with Alien Carvings channel, or the others that were lumped at the time in that same group because there was alien imagery, was the Hongshan culture. And this culture is an ancient Chinese culture. But it kind of, didn't seem right. As you look at this, it seemed off. And long ago at the time, I really thought that the alien things were a hoax. I was sure that I was like, yeah, it's too good to be true, really. And that's ultimately what everyone else thinks is it's too good to be true. It's too prevalent. It's almost silly, it seems. But when you look at the Hongshan stuff, it's like there's a wild amount of it. It's super cheap. And that kind of implies that, well, it's probably not something that they're making. It's something that they're just acquiring. But at the same time, it had this mixed imagery. And that mixed imagery seemed to be, alien. But its cultural artifacts are mostly made up of these little medallion type things. And most people believe that they're some type of amulet or something to be worn. But I ended up proving that wrong. And how I did that was I stumbled on an intentional use for these things. They were largely toggles. Meant to secure some type of string, let's say. And so then the question becomes, to secure what? As you look closer at these things, they're brilliantly engineered. And I was honestly lucky to find out that they functioned in this way, because looking at it, it was very difficult to determine. But ultimately, it was this one piece that kind of sold everything out, was because it had these grooves where it looks like you would put something like a knot with a string, or string with a knot on the end of it, and secure it, like multiple securing locations. And I revisited all of those artifacts on eBay, and I couldn't help but notice there were clearly what's called a tri-glide. And I'm familiar with this because, you handle enough military gear and load-bearing equipment, you end up replacing these things and learn what they're called. And the tri-glide is something that is often used. And it seems to be in their culture. There's these little tri-glides. And so I looked at the rest of the stuff and I thought, how can this stuff be used intentionally? It seemed more useful than it did ornamental. And I was able, through that one, to also determine that they seem to just be toggles. I have some small bushcraft background. I did spend some time in the woods, and I do know how to lash and do these things, and I'm familiar with the concept. And these things seem to have almost like quick release functions built into them. They were brilliant. But they're ornamental. One of the comments that I received under these videos is like, oh, it's for a snare. And in my mind, it's just like, well, that doesn't make too much sense because it's somewhat delicate. If it was hit up against a rock, it would break. It's too flashy. You don't want any animal to see anything out of the ordinary. So that didn't really, I wasn't buying that. It was meant for something with string. Maybe it was curtains, maybe they had some type of, tropical environment where they just used all these like drawstring curtains or whatever. I mean, so each doorway was who knows. Like, the reason I'm speculating in this way is because there's just so many. There's so many that you can buy them for less. They can be shipped to your door for less than the material costs. That's how we know that it's true. The Chinese government doesn't recognize them because the official recognized Hongshan jade dragons sold for like millions of dollars. But you can have one of your own that is 100% legitimate on eBay, and it's just not sanctioned, and it's worth $20 shipped. half of these that you're seeing today are going to be $20 shipped. And they're all these brilliant little toggles. And so the idea is, okay, well, it's like some cordage. It's used for securing maybe draperies, because that can be ornamental. But there's such a vast amount. And that, maybe, but it seemed like it was more than that. And then you realize that these toggles get to be the size of your head. And so it begs the question, if this were a curtain, what kind of curtain would be secured by this? And the way that this functions, well, it's designed so that once you insert it into the loop, all you have to do is flip this and it opens up. This is a giant toggle meant for cordage of some kind. And of all the things that you can speculate as to what that could be for, the only thing that I can think of is clothing of some kind. And the way that this functions, this would lay flat against whatever it toggled into. And it would be pretty and seen, and everyone would see it. Because it likely was to secure some type of belt or garment portion. But what in the world could be so large to use such a massive toggle? If these other ones that I've shared are most likely for at least our size, they're small enough that you could use it for a belt or some type of sash, but I wouldn't say much larger than that. The ones that have cordage built in to where you can quick release some of these things, well, the pulls are from the top. So if it were a curtain, it doesn't make sense that the quick releases are from the top. It would be from the bottom in some form, like a belt, or like something like, you're pulling from down. And so I believe personally it's reasonable to conclude that it's in relation to clothing. But when you get into this size, then it becomes ridiculous, unless those characters existed in our history. These Anunnaki, or these giants, or the Nephilim, or fallen angels, or whatever combination you want to put together, they probably existed, and this is probably related to their clothing. And it costs pennies to purchase on eBay, and they're really fun to play with. So it's one of the coolest things I've actually stumbled on in this whole massive antediluvian journey. I find so much out about this prehistoric world culture that it just blows my mind nearly every week. It's something new all the time, and this is massive. And what's even cooler is they don't really know how these things function. I figured that out, and that also helps you with making little bushcraft toggles. You can make cool quick release toggles out of wood. It's genius. And never mind the connection of some of these Hongshan artifacts to the imagery that I'm finding in my culture. The culture that I discovered that originated in the Ohio River Valley, that I eventually connected in Sicily and the rest of the world, well, it has specific imagery. And that imagery ended up bleeding into that of the alien carvings channels. What he discovered seems to be kind of loosely connected to that culture somehow. And on top of that, these Hongshan pieces, well, I have a few good examples of where, well, it seems to be similar imagery. I think we're dealing with all one culture, a one world culture. And so these Hongshan items, while they don't exactly look like my artifacts, they do share imagery, similarities. And in fact, all my artifacts should just be statuettes that you might find about either outside or inside. They're not anything special. They're not tools. They're just meant to be seen. And so as you look at them, they just look, mostly like messed up rocks. But this Hongshan stuff, well, a lot of it was use case. And the way that they're finding it, well, it must have been in a place that was protected by whatever destroyed this culture. The epicenter really does seem to be North America in some form, or at least the most recent destruction. And so anything that is furthest away from that North American epicenter, well, it's going to be somewhat preserved. And that's why North America is the least ancient of things that we find in the world. It's because it was there. It just got all wiped away. It's, cataclysm. So it's my opinion that what we are looking at with this Hongshan culture, a lot of it has to do with the ornamental nature of clothing accessories. And my brother had a brilliant point. He was joking. He said, wow, that would take a lot of sheep skins to make a robe. And I thought, well, that's your first brilliant statement, is that robe, because what better garment to adorn a giant individual than a robe? I mean, you just got to make a couple, stitches here and there, and it's pretty much done. And so that's his first brilliant thing. It's they were probably wearing robes. And so when I think of these types of securing methods, these toggles, well, that makes sense. I could see how they could be used for robes or sashes or things, belts of those kinds. But the second thing that he said that was smart was when he said lambs, I was like, no, that's way too, you're right. That's a lot of lambs. He was like, yeah, that's a lot of lambs. And then I thought, well, what if it's not lambs? If this culture was so hardcore about the serpent and they were so large, wouldn't it make sense to make their clothing out of this, dragon skin or dinosaur skin? If this culture did exist around the same time that these things also existed, well, then it would make sense that the large individuals would use the large creatures for their purposes, just as we use the large creatures in our society. Now, you might say, well, they worshipped the dragon and they wouldn't harm it, similar to the Hindus and how they respect the cow. Well, this culture was pretty sacrificial, and I wouldn't put it past them to walk around in the skin of whatever they worshipped. And on that note, the last brilliant thing that my brother commented was the way that looks like a hook knife. A lot of times these things are meant to represent the priests, the dragon priests. This type of knife is used for skinning. If this is a representation of these dragon priests in their sacrificial nature, it seems like every portion means something. And so I would believe, absolutely, it possible that that's what that represents, is a tool that's used to consume the flesh of another. Because this culture was dark. And if it ever comes around again, well, be aware. But until then, go check out eBay and get your cool Nephilim gear.